Hey guys, David Vose here. Whoa, what a beautiful day. It's raining cats and dogs, and I just got back from Sedona, and we're going to do part 2 of The Lord Loves You, and Matthew 24, and the coming earthquakes and the famines and what it means. Oh, you'll be surprised, friends. Alright, I already had a lot of this already, ready to go, but I was too busy in Sedona and I couldn't finish it, but here you go. Okay, with the buffalo, we know what happened to them. We went over there and murdered them all. But according to science, in America, there were 4 different kinds of elephants. They call them mammoths, woolly mammoths. And they all were grazing and living here, something like millions and millions of them. And they all disappeared about 12,800 years ago. Which just happens to be when the Great Pyramid said that Atlantis happened. And so these are the ages of time since the flood occurred. And we've come 2,000 years after Christ. So we're talking about 10, 11,000 years before Christ is when it occurred. Now, how do they know that? Well, they're saying that this event, this mass extinction, occurred because of an asteroid. And they're pretty sure about it because of this. They find, going down through the layers of the soil, they find various layers where there was iridium and platinum and uranium more than normal. Way, many times more than normal. Especially the iridium, because for a long time they thought the only way you can get iridium is from an asteroid. I don't know why they think that, because I would assume asteroids are all made up of different things. But they found an asteroid or two and thought, well, there's a lot of iridium in them, and since we find a lot of iridium in this layer right on top of these mammoths and these other animals that are extinct, that it was this iridium that killed them. Something about the iridium. Well, it probably was a giant asteroid that hit the atmosphere and exploded, and all that asteroid dust with all the iridium landed everywhere. But I've never seen an asteroid explode and become dust. They claim it will happen, could happen. I don't doubt it. I don't know. But I haven't seen it. But what I have seen is volcanic dust. And so recently they've found volcanic ash that has a lot of iridium, a lot more iridium than normal. And so many scientists are saying, no, this was probably a volcanic period, not necessarily an asteroid hit the Earth. Or it could be both. Maybe the asteroid caused a big explosion and knocked us off its axis and we had volcanic activity. Or maybe it's something about the elliptical plane of the galaxy that we went every 12,000 years, because it's like clockwork. We're going through some area of the stars. Now, I believe that we're going through some area of the stars, and I think it's a cycle that lasts 12,600 years specifically, because that's the 1,260 days, which we've talked about in other videos, that these ages, like the yugas, they start off 360 years, then they go to 36,000 and 360,000, and this on and on. But there's always multiples of 36, which is why our sphere has 360 degrees, and we've talked all about that. But these are the ages. And they expand. They have these greater ages that work like clockwork. And it's interesting because we have 12 hours in a day. Well, we made that up, right? We could have made an hour anything we wanted to. We could shorten the hour and we'd have 42 hours or something, right? But we've divided the world into 12 for probably a scientific reason. But what's also interesting when we're talking about miles, what's that have to do with hours? Well, we've also got 24,000 miles around the Earth. Isn't that interesting? Did we just make up a mile as something that would end up being the distance around the Earth? Or is it a coincidence? Or is this just them guessing how big the Earth is? Because if they can't get out of the atmosphere, how do they really know how big the Earth is anyway? By getting on a boat? That's kind of like being in a forest and trying to tell me how big the galaxy is. So maybe they don't know how big the Earth is, and this is another guess. And this is where I postulate that what they're doing is they're philosophizing. Because as I started to say, this whole thing was a philosophy until recently. They philosophized that we were the Earth, we're the center, and that there are these spheres, and they had this, it was all 360, and it was all philosophy. It wasn't anything they went up and measured. And so it was geocentric. Well, then they started getting telescopes, and they started with rationalism trying to decide or determine things that they don't know, but they could conclude. Now, this kind of reminds me, and probably will remind you, of the layers that we were talking about. They think, well, if we go down through the layers of the Earth and we find iridium, that was 12,000 years ago. Really. Like carbon dating. It doesn't work with rocks. And I don't know that it works at all. This is what they've told us, but we just accept it on faith. So they actually don't know when the dinosaurs existed. They don't know when there was iridium under the Earth. But I can tell you this. They can dig down a long ways and find civilizations, buildings. In fact, even our present-day buildings in many of these big cities in Europe and Middle Asia and all of the areas around the Middle East and stuff, they dig down and they find buildings that continue on down under the ground. Because it wasn't very long ago, and the Earth is like growing, and the leaves put forth, the trees put forth leaves and foliage and grass, and it all falls down, and every year we get like an inch of soil or something. And over 1,000 years, we've got like, what, that's a long ways. 1,000 inches? I mean, you know, it builds, and the Earth is growing, and everything is being buried. Most people don't realize it, but the Great Pyramids, when we went down there originally, you know, like a couple hundred years ago, there wasn't anything there. We dug it out of the sand. They're still digging up. They're just removing sand and going down. Oh, here's another pyramid. So if you ever find anything on the surface or even below the surface a very short distance, it isn't that old. I guarantee it. Now, of course, there are areas where the wind is maybe for a long period of time blown everything away down to the bedrock, and maybe it hasn't grown or there weren't any trees there. So in areas like in the desert, it might not be quite as old if you go down further. But we're, again, speculation. We haven't a diddly-dang-dong idea how far something was that we dug up or how old it was. We don't really know. It's philosophy, friends. It's absolute philosophy. So in other words, they would say, well, we know how far the star is only because we see that the light is dimmer, and we're going to calculate some rational, irrational conclusion about lights dimming, not taking into account the dust in the air, or that we even know what a star is. So it's just philosophy. And then it was a model, and then they would throw that out. Then they started wondering, and just recently, they decided that our galaxy has 4 spokes. Not very long ago, it was 2 spokes. Because they've never seen it. But it's just philosophy. They come up with weird, crazy reasons that I wouldn't even know, because you'd have to do a lot of reading to find or to admit it. But I have determined that they believe that we live in a galaxy based on stories that are in ancient works that are describing the Garden of Eden and the rivers flowing out, and they would apply this logic, as above, so below. They just kept philosophizing that, well, maybe if we have a sun and a moon and stars and there's 7 planets and this and that and the other thing, that we could philosophize that inside the Earth there's atoms, and we'll call them particles. Well, we discovered not very recently that there are no particles. There are no atoms. So then they postulate, well, maybe there's even smaller ones. We'll go to photons and all different, just philosophy. The model of the atom is absolutely made up, just as the solar model or the galactic model. It's all a philosophy that they have so much reason to hang on to that they will deny anything that comes along that disproves it. Just like scientists today are saying, oh, no, it couldn't be volcanic activity that caused the distinction or the extinction of all these animals, like elephants in America. But it has to be what we've been saying because we don't want to be wrong. So we're going to hang on to our beliefs until you can prove us wrong and get us down and slap us around and make us change our mind, which isn't going to happen in our generation. They're going to hang on to the asteroid idea. Well, maybe they're right. Maybe there's things they know that I don't know. But there's certainly a lot of scientists that believe in the volcanic idea. And lots of people that believe that it cycles and that it goes back to the ancient truths that are written in Plato and Sumerian tablets. But think about this now. After everything we've just talked about, we really don't know how far the stars are at all. They're just looking at dimness and stuff. And I'm going to show you a clip right here, and then I'm going to blow your mind with some information that would just fry a potato without any heat or grease, just by looking at it with this concept, okay? But let me show you an article. I'm going to read just a small clip here to give you a little idea how ignorant these individuals are. One of the major reasons this finding came as a surprise has to do with the fact that Polaris isn't any old star. It's a sort of star known as a Cepheid variable, which means it brightens and dims periodically. Polaris in particular gets brighter and fainter according to a 4-day cycle. And scientists love locating Cepheids due to such very predictable behavior. That's because it allows these stars to be used for cosmic distance measurements. Basically, watching the change in a Cepheid's brightness over one cycle can reveal its true brightness. By contrast, without predictability, periodic pulsations, a star wouldn't be very reliable for such measurements. At risk of simplification, a dim star, for instance, could be either far away or just small, or it could be weirdly dim for some other reason, or it could just happen to be dim during the time at which it was observed. Unlike our lovely sun, Polaris doesn't roam the universe by itself, boasting about 46 times the size of our host star and lying over 400 light years away from us. So they say they can see sunspots on the Polaris star, and it's 400 light years away. It's part of a triple star system. It just happens to be the brightest of its siblings. In fact, the original goal of Chara's Polaris investigation was to map the orbit of the star that circles our North Star. Well, a couple of things here. One, they admit in the text that they don't have any reliable way to, any way, regardless of reliable. I mean, they have absolutely no way to find out how far it is to the stars. Because if you look at a star and it's dimmer, it could be that it's farther away, it could be that it's smaller, or it could be some other reason. There's dust between us and the star. They've said that. They claim there's all this astrological dust, cosmic dust. So it's literally ludicrous to say they know how far it is. And then they go on to say, but now, we can see sunspots on that star. 400 light years away. Well, why do you keep repeating that it's 400 light years away? And then if you don't know how far the stars are, how is it that you know that there are other stars that are in a little triplex going along with Polaris? You know that those stars that are closer to the star happen to be all in a little group. But what if they're light years, hundreds of light years away from each other, but just so far away, You see, they don't know anything. It's absolute bonkers. And the problem is that we're reading all of this with trust. Because if you didn't trust it, you'd pick up all this stuff. You'd notice that they just said they couldn't tell you how far the stars were. And then in the next sentence said it was 400 light years away. And they just go on with that like that's important and we understand that. But we don't understand it. So it's schizophrenia in the mind of the writers and the readers. Because you, the reader, believes the schizophrenic writer who's telling you what a schizophrenic scientist just said. This is insanity, friends. Now, keep in mind that this is the same generation, the same logic, the same people, the same scientists that are making pharmaceutical drugs that are killing people every day, and not just one here and there. In fact, I just saw an article where they've now admitted that the fluoride they're putting in the water is remarkably lowering the IQ of all the children in the world. Do you think they'll start putting less in? They'll probably just put, maybe they're just they've outdated the fluoride, they're going to use some other poison now. So they'll say, oh yeah, we got rid of the fluoride, go ahead and drink the water. Don't worry about the arsenic though. Or the chlorine, or whatever else they're putting in there. You know. But when you think about the fact that there are lots of people that believe in the medical industry and they will go to the doctor every time they get a sniffle. Now that's insanity. But there are people that don't believe in going to the doctor when you get a sniffle. But if they feel pain here or there, they'll go get a checkup and they'll say, oh, you've got cancer. They feel, you know what, there's a little pain here in their side. It could be indigestion, but the doctor says we've run some tests and you've got cancer. What they don't tell you is everybody has cancer because they put it into your bloodstream with this little program that they started when we were, back in the 1950s. I was just reading about the fluoride. They put that in the water the first time in 1945. I wonder why. Well, it started in the early 50s, basically. But the first time they tried it was 1941, because that's when NAZI, that's a Project Kill Y'all, right? From the Project Paperclip guys. So, we see with that it's a purposeful thing. It wasn't even an accident. And here's the thing. What about religion? You see all the people blindly following religion. But let's take it from one angle. Usher made a chronology, and everybody believed in that. All Christians believed in that. I mean, probably basically to this day. They say that Adam lived 4,000 years before Christ. Well, I will tell you categorically that's absolutely wrong, because we're going to show you today that the flood occurred thousands of years ago. It didn't just happen, in their model, it would be like less than 3,000 years before Christ. Because the flood happened, according to them, 1,600 years after Adam. So the 4,000 years BC back to Adam, you got to cut off 1,600 years. So it's just relatively recent. Now, they always would say, oh, look at the seashells, and oh yeah, the mammoths that are all gone, they lived before the flood. That was a great one. But it was all speculation as well. And maybe it's true, but it's speculation. We don't know. Christians would go and come up with stuff like, well, a day for the Lord's like 1,000 years in this case. But over here in this case, every year is a day. And so if there's a prophecy that says something about 2,300 evenings and mornings, it must be 2,300 years. And we'll make something up that might have happened at that time. This is the logic that Christians have been following. Ezekiel was told to lie on his side for 40 days, a day for a year, for the 40 years of exile, to symbolically go through the exile himself, portraying the original actual exile of 40 years. And also, there was some 40-year or I should say 40 days of disobedience by Israelites, and he said, I'm going to punish you a day for a year. So they wandered in the wilderness for 40 years to pay for their sins. And there's a few other places we know that in Daniel, the 490 weeks are weeks of years, because it's accepted by everyone, even the rabbis, and it comes out to the time of Christ who fulfilled that. So there's quite a bit of reasoning behind it, but we don't know then that the 1,260 days are necessarily 1,260 years like Adventists believe. It's a lot of speculation. And we don't know, as we've already seen in part 1, that the words that we're reading about mountains falling and stars coming down from the sky and the heavens rolling up like a scroll, all of this is literal, or if it's some kind of esoteric language. Well, we know it's esoteric now, don't we? You and I know this. But what I'm trying to tell you is there's something we never knew, and that is that the language itself that we have today, our language, is not describing a physical universe. And you might say, well, yeah, but of course there is a physical universe, Dave. But why did they start with the premise that every word is spiritual? A mountain means something impregnable, coming from the stability of the ground, which is your belief system. And plants and flowers that bloom and then fade away in the fall. The Apostle Peter, quoting from Psalms, talks about it being just aspirations and you know, ideas that just fade away. We come up with these beautiful ideas and then they just die in the winter. But trees are impregnable. And that's hard to get rid of that and uproot a tree and throw it in the sea. But that's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil that we're under. And we've always thought that, well, maybe the paradise that we came from was a original physical earthly paradise that we've got to restore to this physical condition by pruning the trees and loving the animals. And I think that makes sense. However, what if the original home wasn't physical at all? What if we never were physical beings? What if we're spiritual beings? And what if the original paradise is the third heaven, as the Apostle Paul says, whether he was in the body or out of the body, he couldn't say. Wherever he wasn't even in the body. At least not this body. And we've proven from other verses that there is a spiritual body. And Paul says that there is a physical one, there is a spiritual one. There's a lot to speculate on here, friends, but I'm telling you that we live in a spiritual world, not a physical world. And the so-called physical world we have proven doesn't even exist, even though you believe it. That's how bad the deception is. Not just that people are believing in the science, but that you're believing in your own lying eyes, thinking that walls are solid when they're not. They've proven they're not. Oh yeah, we know that, Dave, but that's still, yeah, they're still solid, even if they're not. Right? But now we've proven that there's no atoms. If we've been telling kids and we've been believing for thousands of years that there's these atoms, and right now over in CERN they're taking photons and shooting them at almost the speed of light and having them collide, and they're coming with this amazing scientific information when they've already said there are no photons. There is no such thing as anything that you can shoot anywhere. It's like a television movie, as we've seen. If you see a man traveling down the road in a movie and he's got 20 miles to the next city, and you measure that by whatever philosophy you have, well, it took him 10 minutes in the coach and he got out in a new city, and therefore we can speculate it was 20 miles if he was going this fast. But it's a movie. There wasn't anything there. There wasn't no roads. There wasn't any stagecoach. There wasn't anything. It was a movie. It doesn't exist. And you say, yeah, but it sure looked like it did. Well, okay, dreams sure look like they're real, but you wake up and where did they go? There isn't anything here. We are spiritual beings. We're imagining all of this. And so they're trying to measure distances in your imaginary mind. And they've come up with philosophies about what makes up the imaginary composition of all the imaginary things that you're imaginarily looking at. It's all speculation to try and somehow come to a place where we feel like we understand what we're doing here. But we're on the wrong track. We're not going to get anywhere by trying to measure imaginary atoms or shoot them down a little hole through a, hydro collider or whatever at CERN and come up with some way to open the bottomless pit, unless you're trying to open up a demonic spiritual pit, which is what they're trying to do. So do they really know? Long time ago they figured it out, and they're just, listen to me. If Elon Musk and the other scientists believe that religious people are fantasizing, or it's superstition, that there is no deity and there is no angels and there is no, because they're smarter than we are and they figured it out. We're just ignorant fools who believe in all these fairy tales. Well, what's really crazy is that the biggest fairy tale of all is science. It's based on lies, superstition, philosophy, and it's a fairy tale. And Elon Musk is not just believing in it, but he's claiming that he's making things that are going up into the sky and going out of the atmosphere, but yet now we're finding out you can't go out of the atmosphere, that you cannot get out of it. It may be frozen up there, or we don't know. It's all speculation. They don't have a picture of any of the stars. It's all CGI. Can you imagine how ignorant that fool is to believe all of this? Any of these scientists, Einstein, he sits in a classroom and gets his PhD and comes up with some formula equals MC squared, and the whole world's like, oh my goodness, look at, we've proven how far the star is, and it works. That was a lie. All these things that they said that Einstein's theories proved, all of those proofs were just made up. It's like somebody made a movie, and we've all been living in it. We don't even know what stars are. We don't know if light travels that fast, like he says. We don't even know if the earth is round. They were lying. Now, if the great scientists were actually mesmerized by this, which is, you could only call it a religion. It wasn't science. Neither was the science in the ancient times. Plato was, well, what Plato was doing was going by ancient writings in the pyramid walls, the priesthood. Now, you could believe, like I do, that it was handed down from some knower, like this is divine truth. The plan of salvation was written in the pyramids, and I trust that, and I have reasons to trust it. But they think I'm a fanatic. They're the fanatics because they believe in they made this stuff up. I'd rather trust what was written in a pyramid that is so fantastic that no human could build it. They prove in their writings that they knew where all these stars were, and they could see certain things that we can't even see. They knew things that we don't even know. There's some Aboriginal tribe in Africa that knew about the dog star Sirius and the little, they called them the Dogon tribe, right? The dog, and they got all this knowledge of these stars that we can't even see with telescopes today. And the Bhagavad Gita and the Indian scriptures talk about these yugas and Kali yugas and great yugas that last 1.5 trillion years. And the age of Brahman, which lasts 1 billion years. And what were they talking about? We don't know. Let's just start saying that over and over. We don't know. But since we don't know anything, I would rather investigate that Great Pyramid, because when I read the story of Christ, the whole New Testament, and I see that the story and all the stories of the Old Testament are all based on the same stories that's written in the stars, and those stars tell the same story that was written in the Great Pyramid, then I start having faith. It's kind of like what the Bible says there in the New Testament. It says that there were prophets and men of faith who spoke the word of deity, divinely breathed and given to them as prophets. They don't know. The prophets didn't know. They were humble men. They didn't say they knew. They said that the Lord told them to tell you this. And nobody believed them. But today, they all agree. Not just the ones in our 66 books that they've allowed you to read, but the ones in the East, and the ones in the West, and the ones in the North, and the ones in the South, and all of them. And there's this strange language that we've discovered written in the stars. And it turns out that that strange language written in the stars is the same basis for our actual language that our Bible tells us was confused at the Tower of Babel. And that we're now in a prison planet ruled over by demons who are trying to confuse and deceive you. The devil is the deceiver. And he wants your babies. And he set up a system and he made you sign a contract. And that's what supposedly legality is. Legal means you signed a contract under duress. Oh no, worse than that. We didn't even sign the contract. It was our ancestors. So we're forever obliged to go round and round in their mental trap where they deceive us into this bubble of ideas and lies, and we believe it. We're in a prison, believing all their lies, believing their cosmologies, believing their crap. They know all about the ancient wisdom. They do the pyramids, but they do it upside down. You know, when they show you on the stage, you know, rock and roll. Satanism created rock and roll, and Satanism was created by Aleister Crowley, who did just what the Bible said somebody would do. Open up the bottomless pit, you know, way back with John Dee and Edward Kelly, which is the Illuminati that's brought on the guy who actually wrote our New Testament and well, the whole Bible, which was commissioned by King James, and his brother Francis Bacon wrote it in some kind of angel language. English, angel language. The angel language supposedly was brought to mankind by Edward Kelly and John Dee for the royal princess crown, to make Britain the world power and to bring up Satan from the bottomless pit and put us all under this magical language called angel language. Well, I guarantee it's not the angels that follow Jesus. It's a language that keeps you in a spell. It's a science that is false. It keeps you in a delirium. You say, yeah, but it's all real, Dave. Look at the tree right there. There's a tree, and if I bump into it, it'll hurt. No. This is mind conditioning. You're walking around in a trance. You're not forced to do anything. You're a divine being, and they don't want you to know that. The worst thing you could ever do during the Dark Ages and to this day is to claim to be a divine being. Claim to be free. There were people who knew these ancient truths. They created the Constitution. They said you're free. But now, of course, they purchased your soul and deceived you in this maze. And we believe it. And we're begging and pleading, please make America great again. Trump, please rule over us. Make more laws. And we need law and order. And they made the ones who believe in liberty look like goons. They're running around saying, oh, we believe in liberty, but what is liberty? Well, a man should cut off his wee-wee. That's what liberty is. And we're so confused now, we think that's liberty. And we'd rather be following some interpretation of Christ that isn't really a belief in Christ. It's a belief in some upside-down cross. It's a blasphemy. Even this thing, this whole movement. We've got to say Yeshua. We've got to say Yeshua. We've got to keep the Sabbath. You want to go back under the law? Ye who believe in law, do you not read the law? It is slavery. You have no idea that Yahwehism and all these holy days and Sabbaths and these laws were made by a man, and I just did a video on this, and you can go back and look at it, who wanted to eat your babies and drink their blood. And in order to live here without being pillaged, we are being pillaged every day. They allow us to live a few short years as slaves, but we have to give them our firstborn children, and they will eat and drink under this covenant. They will eat and drink our babies. And some of you think I'm lying. Go back and watch the video I just did about this. Go back and look at your Bible and read it. Yahweh says, to me belongs all the babies that come out of the womb, the firstborn, whether man or beast. I get them all. And the priesthood was set up so that they could slaughter these babies, children and humans. And it's in the Bible. It's called Molech. Acts chapter 7 says this Yahweh is Molech, and the tent of Molech they carried through the wilderness. In the book of Isaiah, which is the true El, said, hey, who told you to do this? You wouldn't receive me, and you went off and began to worship the host of heaven and sacrifice your babies to him. And Jesus and the prophets kept coming and telling us, don't listen to them. Oh, we don't believe in prophets, you silly. We believe in all this deception. Let's give our babies to Yahweh. Do you see what's going on? So if religion's a hoax, then don't be religious. Oh, that means we don't believe in any divine attributes of humanity. There's no deity. There's no purpose. We should just lay in the streets and screw each other endlessly over and over and over and over again while eating pizza with hot sauce dripping down our face. And then we're going to get into such a raging, passionate, orgiastic fit that we'll be killing one another. Then we're going to have people on the street with machine guns to off us because we've gone crazy. We've got to have the military on every corner telling us how far we can drive our car, or how fast we can drive our car, how much pleasure we can actually have, right, before we kill somebody. This is their liberalism. In the meantime, they're telling us that that's an evil thing to have liberalism. Look what it's doing. They've gone through this now for a long, long time, especially in the last 50 years, showing us what liberalism does to us, what freedom does to us. Freedom makes us freaks. Freedom makes us run around having orgies in the street, killing one another, out of our mind on some drug, believing in some fantasy deity, Jesus. I want you to know that a great big hoax is right now beginning to form that we're about to go into if we don't do something and wake up fast. However, I do have some good news, and I don't know if we'll even get into it in this video because I've got something I want to share with you. I'll maybe talk about it a little here, but if we don't get to it all, we're going to have to do another video. But I want to share with you what's really going on that you don't know. Nobody knows this. Is the Bible literal or is it spiritual? Well, is our language literal or spiritual? Are we literal or are we spiritual? Are we abiding? Are we infinitely immortal? Are we powerful? Are we happy? Should we be always happy? Should we live in freedom? Or is it this world that we live in where we bump into walls and we can't go and there's prisons and people are, out of their mind, rabid, running around eating each other? Is that just nature? Or maybe this nature is a spell upon us, which is given to us by the language and the science because it's lies. Because that's what the Bible tells us. Satan is a liar and we're under his kingdom. And Jesus said, my kingdom is no part of this world. But the Apostle Paul did say there are two Jesuses. Yeah, he said, the Jesus you got, that's another Jesus. That's what Paul said. And he talked about how this was going to happen. The Antichrist, people think the Antichrist is some evil guy that's coming along. It's their version of Christ. There's two fulfillments of the Bible. There's the spiritual one, which is what it really is. Right? It's the spiritual concepts of life and freedom. The spiritual world. And then you can take it all literally. The letter of the law is death, and it's a curse. And you can believe there's an actual man coming who's going to make America great again. And build more roads and prisons and schools and propaganda, what that is. Entertainment, which is mind-numbing propaganda that keep you enslaved in your mind and in your like developing your lustful, egotistical nature and bypassing and separating you from your higher spiritual reality, which you can only have if you know it. But if you're in a delusion, you don't even know that you can walk right out of this evil, wicked world. The world didn't have a beginning. It wasn't Big Bang. And before that was nothing, and we're going to go back to nothing unless we let these scientists give us some sort of a holographic world and suck us down into a computer chip, and we'll live in their new created biotech world, and we'll all be doing orgies and all the stuff that they've got planned for us. And people are like, yay, I mean, I enjoy life the way it is. Honk, honk, going downtown, there's cars running everywhere. We're in a fit of rage trying to get to our job on time and punch the clock. But we can't imagine a world without it. Porcelain toilet seats, how could we live without them? Without radios, without being a cyborg. Elon Musk says you're already a cyborg. Let me show you a little clip here, right here. This will blow your mind. This is what we're going into right here.
We are culturally a Christian country. I call myself a cultural Christian. I'm not a believer.
I'm actually a big believer in the principles of Christianity. I think they're very good.
So in what sense, then, are you not religious?
I choose to accept Jesus Christ, the teachings of Jesus Christ, the story of Jesus Christ. I choose to accept that.
Hercule, Neil Ferguson, Russell Brand, Joe Rogan, Douglas Murray.
What are you doing with Joe Rogan?
Yeah, well, Joe's already, he's got a foot in the camp.
I began to realize that actually, in almost every way, I am Christian.
I don't really understand people who don't wish it to be true.
Both these atheists have arrived at a consensus that we should go to church on Sunday.
The culture is shifting from a sort of new atheism, Christianity is evil and terrible and wrong, to, yeah, it might be wrong, we'll sort of brush that bit under the carpet, but try to display the virtuous ethics of Christianity.
So, if you believe that this is spontaneously going to get fixed because now everybody's going to wake up and start being Christians. I mean, wasn't it just yesterday that we were told that you will comply? You're just too stupid, you superstitious Christians. Why, that's the new group. I just heard that there's 3 things that's about to happen that Klaus Schwab was just saying at some pulpit, I think yesterday, before the whole crowd, and saying this is the agenda. Number 1, there's going to be a new group they're going to identify as the enemy. No longer Islamic terrorists, but it's going to be probably Christian nationalists or Christian terrorists or something. Number 2, they're going to have some kind of a huge economic, EMP, the banks go down, some electronic problem, or the grid goes down or something. And number 3, they're going to have this thing about the global warming issue, and they're going to prove to everybody that it's true. You fools, you idiots. The only person that can save you is science, because global warming's coming and Jesus don't care about you. In fact, look at that whole island just sunk. They've got either an island or a city on the coast somewhere. I've been telling you, they're bringing all the Christians to Florida and Texas to have a big hurricane and wipe them off the face of the map. And then they'll say, oh, look at 16 mega hurricanes in a row and wiped out every city in Florida and Texas. I guess we better do something. There's global warming. Meanwhile, no more Christians. All the liberals are still there in California. Oh, yeah, and a bunch of homeless people in California, but they're living on the street. They stopped allowing them to squat and shit in the street. and don't feed them anymore, and boom, they all die tomorrow. Give them an overdose, and boom. They know where the drugs are coming from. They just give it to them. They'll all just spaz out on the street and die. They're just using them as a way to make you think they're kind and they're philanthropists and they care about the homeless. Well, if they cared about the homeless, they wouldn't have destroyed our country in California. They want everybody to live in these 15-minute cities. They're going to depopulate the world. This is a big lie if you believe that they're now suddenly turning to Christianity. What they're going to do is they're going to turn to the Noahide laws. And you can do anything you want as long as you're Indian, Hindu, well, their idea of Hinduism, the New Age movement, where Jesus was just one of many masters that came to the world. And of course, some of the greatest masters were Satanists. And you're misinterpreting Jesus' words. He was only just a man. And he believed that one day science would take over the world. Their idea of we are deity is our science, our lies. Yahweh is the true deity. Why, that was Jesus' father, obviously, who made law and order in the one world government that's coming, and you'll put the mark upon your forehead or your hand. That's what they're going to advocate. And Christianity, because there's a lot of Christians, if you'll accept their brand of Christianity, which is you don't really believe in Jesus, but you like the idea of love your neighbor. But their idea of love your neighbor is get along, don't say anything, and follow the government and get the mark upon your hand or your forehead. This is the new kingdom of Jesus on earth, but it won't be the kingdom of Jesus. They'll only tell you that at the beginning. It's Yahweh's kingdom. Of course, that's his father, they claim. And he wants your babies. It's just perpetuating all the lies and consolidating it all into a one world deity, which is what Yahweh claimed he was going to do in his prophecies from the very beginning, if you look at the literal prophecies of Yahweh. So we're back around here to Matthew 24. Nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and food shortages and earthquakes in one place after the other. Food shortages. Where'd that come from, right? Well, some people say famine. But as we saw, that word means hunger. Let's take a look at that. Well, this is the Watchtower organization's website, and they're going to give you their New World Order Bible. And in Luke and Matthew, it says, this is Luke 21. Jesus answered, nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and there will be great earthquakes, and in one place after another pestilences and food shortages. Food shortages, in one place after the other. Earthquakes. We just saw yesterday that the word earth isn't in there, just quakes. And it's not quakes, it's just shakings. And this word, food shortages? Is that really what Jesus said? Let's look. Okay, Luke 21:11. And New International Version, earthquake, famines, and pestilence. New Living, earthquakes, famines, and plagues. Let's go to King James. Famines and pestilence and fearful sights and great signs. Earthquakes in diverse places. Well, remember what we showed, and we were looking at Matthew. Well, now we're looking at Luke. It's kind of another rendition of the same thing in another book. Instead of Matthew, we're looking at Luke. And again, earthquake, they translate it, is this 4578 seismo, and it just means a shaking or a mixing up. A crazy shaking. Doesn't have any, the word earth isn't in there. And seismic activity is something we use today based on that Greek word, which means shaking. And we've commandeered the word today, and we say it means earthquakes. But it never meant that. It just means shaking. Not just earth, but anything you shake. And then famines. Now, the New World Translation says food shortages. Well, they're saying famines. But remember what we did? We looked at that word, and it says hunger. It doesn't mean a famine of food, not having enough food or food shortages, but it means the spiritual concept of the word, the root of the idea of famine, which is hunger. And hunger isn't necessarily for food. You can be hungry for many things. If you look at the world today, it's not really marked by famine as much today as it is marked by a hunger to know truth, but you can't find the truth. And actually, the Bible tells you that over and over again. The hunger will be a hunger for the word of the Lord, a thirst for the knowledge of the Lord, but we won't find it. Because we're in lies, we're living in lies. Deception everywhere. The Bible doesn't say there will be great food shortages and earthquakes, friends. And if we're having plagues, they're not from the Lord. They're not natural. Those pestilences that you see are created by the deceiver, Yahweh. Just as we saw many times before, the idea of pestilence or plague comes from Yahweh, and he put the plagues on the Egyptians, and it was gnats and flies and frogs and locusts, which cause great harm and possibly even disease. Dis-ease. No ease, no easiness, just a dis-ease. Deterioration, unhealth, illness. Not a natural pathogen, not a natural, the natural world doesn't just die. It doesn't get sick. It doesn't have pain. All this pain was the punishment of Yahweh, the destroyer, the El Shaddai, or Satan, which means the great storm deity, the destroyer, also known as Typhon, Yahweh. And he brought the plagues, and he told the Israelites that if you don't want to have these plagues, you got to bow down and worship me. How can worshiping Yahweh stop you from getting plagues? Well, they're doing it today. If you don't do what they say, they'll give you plagues. They're not natural. They're not even real. It's a deception. It's a lie. Jesus didn't say he was going to send famine in the earth. If there was going to be any kind of famine or hunger, it was going to be done and given to us by Yahweh. Remember, we're about to face the great deception. Okay, think about what that might mean, the great deception. Then we're going to have a great awakening. The veil, revelation means an unveiling. And if you take the veil off, what happens? Well, Paul says the veil is the scriptures, the literal letter. And I suspect it means the deception that holds you in the mind control that makes you believe that this physical world with pain and suffering and death is real, but it's not. And the unveiling is when we're going to be released, waiting for the revealing of the freedom of the sons of deity, according to Romans. Jesus is coming to bring his freedom. But what that means is he's going to destroy the illusion. He's going to get rid of the delusion. And how do you do that? With truth. The truth or the light destroys the darkness. So Jesus isn't bringing darkness. He's bringing light. He's not bringing pain. He's not bringing punishment. He's bringing deliverance, salvation. For all who receive the love of the truth, that they might be saved and delivered from the wrath that's coming. The wrath that's coming is the consequence or the orgy. The word in Greek is orgy. And it means a bunch of people getting together and choosing to indulge in all kinds of violence. Like the Purge, the Great Purge. You've seen the movies. This is coming because people are going to do it. They've decided. They're under a strong delusion. But you and I, us Christians, are going to get out of the world. You're in the world, you're going to be a partaker of her plagues. You're not in the world, you're not going to be a partaker of her plagues. And whatever her plagues, deceptions, lies, superstition, ignorance. You whack your hand off, it hurts. You did it. The Lord's begging you not to do it, not to whack off your wee-wee, not to be insecure about who you are, but to be happy and to know that the Lord is with you and He loves you. Nothing is going to happen to anybody who simply doesn't get deceived. The people got oil in their lamps. Their light's going to shine. Why do you need oil in your lamps? Well, Dave, that's just not fair. You got to have oil in your lamps. Well, you're a lamp. Means you're shining the light of truth. The love. And when your love and your light go out, and you don't know who you are, where you've been, or what you're doing here, and you believe in all this insanity, these doctors and these scientists and this prison house, and the pain and the judgment and the plagues, then you're going to live in your little delusion. And what's going to happen is your little delusion, you're going to die. Oh, no, your delusion will go away, and you'll wake up in the kingdom. You wake up in Jesus' arms. And He'll say, "Oh, it's okay, it's okay." And He'll hold you, say, "It was just a nightmare. It was just a nightmare. It's okay. I got you free from that." Oh, don't worry, my child. We got your mind out of the grip of Satan. You're with me in reality. You didn't go anywhere. You didn't die. You're right here with me. I'm holding you now. Everything's going to be all right. But there's a few of us that will have woken even before the fall of all this insanity. And because of us, the instruments, the Lord will be working through us, speaking through us. Right? Because His Spirit, the mind of Christ is in us. We heard the gospel and we went and preached. We were awoke and we taught the good news. And because of us, people will find the light. We'll put it on a hill. Jesus says you don't put a light under a basket, right? You put it on the table stand, on a light stand. And you shine. Put it on a mountain and let it shine all over the world. Well, that's what we're going to do. We're going to be a beacon on a hill. We're going to tell the world the truth. There's nothing to fear. There's nothing to worry about. The Lord loves you. And all of this garbage you're hearing is crap. And tomorrow, I think we're going to talk a lot more about some of these other things I want to share with you about how our language and how our belief system and everything is false. And how to come out from this strong delusion. Well, it's almost an hour. I'm going to go ahead and close it there. It's raining, you can probably hear, and I got to, you probably can't hear me over the rain anyway. But, friends, we're going to go into Revelation tomorrow about how the two witnesses bring fire down from heaven and turn the waters into blood. And the false prophets are going to be bringing fire down from heaven. And the difference between the two fires. Who won? Elijah or the Baal prophets? Elijah won. He's the one that brought the fire, right? Elijah's going to win this battle. The anointed ones on this earth, the truth will win. And the book of Revelation is about two different kinds of fire, two different kinds of destruction. But the ones that are trying to physically destroy you and this earth will fail, and they will not. It says He's going to bring to ruin those who are ruining the earth. So stay tuned for tomorrow, friends. It's going to be really eye-opening. And please, this is probably the most important videos I've ever done. Because we're now beginning to really understand what's about to happen. Because it's about to happen. And the Lord is enlightening us that we don't have to be afraid. We need to get this out, friends. The Lord loves you. We'll see you tomorrow. He will bless you. Just ask Him. Have a good one.